on.
Hello everybody, I'm over at Brian Scase's house. He has an O-scale railroad, and he's going to introduce himself, and then we're going to show you some stuff about planning, operations, and different ideas about setting up your railroad. So here's Brian.
I've been designing layouts for, actually I've been building layouts and designing them for something like 60 years. I learned most of my layout design from two sides of the coin. One was living 5 blocks away from John Armstrong, and the other, of course, some UK design things, which is going to bring us where we're going to go here, which is layout design in spaces that average people have. And I'm going to go out on the limb and say that layout design has been kind of morbid in the US, at least, for easily 40 years. Linear design is what everybody sees. You know, the bit, this hidden staging over here, hidden staging over here. The trains come out of hidden staging out into the scene to like a division point yard. Some sort of sex and violence happens, and then they go to hidden staging again. And these things, to be absolutely honest, are really space intensive. And the average person's basement, especially today, as spaces get smaller and moving for work gets more commonplace, becomes impractical. As long as that continues to be the school of thought and the only school of thought, people don't build because they'll look at their space and rightfully say, I'm not in a place to be able to do that right now. So I'm going to just show you a couple of things, and we're going to start with something really simple, which is much more of the UK school of thought than the American school of thought. Some of you people have probably seen it. The single scene switcher type thing. I'm building this for a friend of mine right now. It comes apart in 2 sections, 4-foot by 20-foot sections, comes together as an 8-foot switching layout, has all the features that you need, a runaround track so that you can get around cars and spear them into whichever direction turnouts and sidings you have. You can basically write your own scenario on this sort of thing. This is very common. This sort of thing is very common in the UK, and it's also very common in exhibitions. It's very transportable. And the important thing about this, especially with these features of the passing sidings feeding the destinations, this is going to become a very important element in a type of design that we're going to show you here in just a minute.
Okay, thanks Brian. Off to the next scene. We're good?
So now what we're going to talk about is a different design philosophy from linear design, which combines that single scene switcher that you just saw with a lot of the elements that come out of American layout design. The result is something that I've clinicked as Nodal design, which basically is scenes with purposes that are strung together, sometimes with trackages totally hidden and totally bizarre. You can think of it in terms of dioramas if you'd like. You can think of it in terms of network design, where you have a server and you have a whole bunch of clients. Any of those will work. What you saw of that single scene switcher, this is a destination node right here. And what you saw, the elements you saw in the single scene switcher exist here. As a matter of fact, it's probably the only design rule you need, is that this, as a destination, needs to operate just like a single scene switcher. So you have a passing loop here again, going up through here so that you can get around your trains. You have the various turnouts, in this case an interchange yard that's back over here. You have the various sidings where your traffic is sitting here waiting to be picked up. And the type of operation that this is now going to support is not dispatching of trains, but it's the terminal functions of a railroad, which Without those terminal functions, the railroad doesn't exist. It's the actual serving of the customers. So a train will come in here. There's room for it to come in with all the traffic that it needs to turn around and pick up and make all its pickups out of these sidings and replace those pickups with the set outs for the customers that would go in these sidings. The destination node, therefore, the one rule, it has to be able to operate like a single scene switcher. If I cut this thing off right back there, I can sit here and run this thing just like a UK display layout, an exhibition layout. This over here actually is 1/4 of a yard. This is the central node. This you could think of as the serving. It has one rule, and the one rule is it has to have the cargo capacity to support all the destination nodes you string to it. So in this case, what we have is we have classification tracks. We have combined the advance and receiving function of an advance yard and a receiving yard. We have the various trimmer tracks, switches working both ends, locomotive facility. So this is actually a fully functional yard in a prototype sense. There's a lot of selective compression in here, but all the functions are there. The classification of the cars and the sorting, the trimming of the cars and the pulling of them to make up trains to depart, and the ability to receive trains coming back and break them down and reclassify them again. And again, the only rule for a central node is that it has to have the capacity to serve all the destinations. So on this railroad, we have this yard. We have the destination node you just looked at, and there's actually a second destination node in here, right around the corner. Again, this destination works exactly the same as a single scene switcher. The ability to run your locomotive around either end of the train, to break it down, put your cars into the proper places for the customers, take their pickups, reassemble the train, and move on, in this case, in either direction. Again, if I turn around and cut off both ends, this can function as a layout all onto itself. The fun about this, or the good parts about this, is if you're doing your layout design thoughts, one of the first things obviously you want to do is a Givens and Druthers exercise, is what John called it. I've carried that through with a Givens and Druthers list, which I can share with you somehow. We'll figure out how to do that. But three of the biggest givens are going to be the space that you have, not only the size, but the configuration. This entire layout, by the way, in 2 rail O, is only 33.5 feet long, 13 feet wide. So it fits in the average cellar, in the average Levitt and Cape, which is what I live in. And there's no reason that this cannot be done in pretty much any average size house in America. How was the point I was about to make? You're gonna have to chop this section off because I gotta think. We're going to back to the Givens and Druthers exercise that you've obviously gone through to define your space. Space is the important thing. By the way, think in 3 dimensions. Your height, like for instance up to here, in this house, is, it's about 6.5 feet. So I have low ceiling heights to deal with. All these define what your limitations are. The scale you choose, that's a limitation. In my case, I'm doing O. There's radii to consider, grades to consider, your reach to consider, those sorts of things. We can get into all that in a different video. The other thing, of course, is the prototype that you choose. Now, in this case, there is no prototype because we change out scenarios in here. Last time we operated, the last video you watched, we were doing, if memory serves me right, Lehigh Valley and Lehigh, New England in
Correct.
1960. What's on here right now is Louisville and Nashville in southwestern Indiana in 1975, which is going to be our next scenario that we run here. There's probably at least 10 more of them that are fully equipped and ready to run on here. In that space, though, what I'm able to do is I'm able to bring in operating crews, bring them in like every other month. We have a whole different scenario that we run, so there's always a nice variety of both the equipment and the operation that happens. And so far, I haven't had anybody quit in over 2.5 years, which really sort of surprises me. This railroad, by the way, has been under construction for only 4. And our first operation was just before the COVID pandemic, which obviously kind of slung some things down. Let's look at something. You'll notice this is sort of like a diorama, right? It's a single scene. It's an enclosed scene. You're going to stand here and you're going to look at this. Going between this scene and the scene adjacent, if we back up a little bit, what we've done is rather than have these scenes all just flow together like the normal linear design, again, this is a departure. Here we just have it all flow to as far as it's going to flow scenically, and then we hide any sort of bizarre, ugly trackage that you need to rearrange your train to enter into the next diorama. So this is almost, it can be thought of as a series of dioramas that you have hooked together. The fun thing about dioramas that you hook together is you can also take them apart.
And that 4-track was your yard lead?
Yeah, the 4-track is actually, yeah, I'll show you what's in here. I mean, that's the class yard lead is back here. And this is the running track, and scenically, it's kind of impossible, and plus I've got a couple of electric panels back here that I need access to. So, the impossibilities you hide, and if you've ever worked in theater, you know that the best color to hide something that people isn't going to pay attention to is black.
Right.
So, rather than having like this straight linear flow, we have discrete scenes, and the discrete scenes are all hooked together. And if the trackage is impossible to reorient the train to enter into the next scene, well, you just hide it, and it's not a problem. It can be disassembled. This could be hooked back up with any number of destination nodes. You could do it in the form of spokes of a wheel. You could do it in completely linear form. You could have other destinations off on the other end of this thing. The flexibility of how you hook this thing up is really pretty unlimited. It's only limited by your space.
Yeah.
Your space configuration.
Right.
And the other thing that goes with it is, if you get tired of this section, you can cut it off, totally rebuild it, totally junk it. It's not going to affect how this operates and how the other destination operates, so you can still run trains and operate, even though you might have one section of this thing completely torn out and under construction. So this is a layout that is going to just continue living, as opposed to you got to jump the whole thing and start over again. Lastly, as you get old, you'll notice, and your longevity's in this gig. As you get older, you're gonna really resent duck unders, lift outs, hidden trackage, double decking, all those things that require you to stoop and stretch. You're just not gonna like it. No duck unders here. There's no hidden trackage here. I don't have to double deck to get my scenes. And actually, I don't have to worry so much about the length of the main line to get both my operational plausibility and the enjoyment of all the people that come over and run this. So that's kind of an introduction to nodal design. Just remember again, the two types of nodes. There's central node and the destination nodes that are hooked to it. All the destination nodes, each one has to work as a single seed switcher. The central node has to have the car capacity to feed these. From then on, you can add any number of nodes as long as you got the capacity and each one can work by itself. You can't screw up the design. And if you do, all you have to do is take out the one section and fix it. You don't have to scrap and start the railroad. A lot of the fear of designing and building a layout, like designing yourself into a dead end, goes away with this methodology. So this is an example of it. I'm not really the guy that would say invented it. There's been several of us all over the world that I know of that have built to this methodology. It works. And it works in a modest space. And it works even with larger scales in a modest space. So it's an option.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan.